this episode of In the House, we sit down with Brent Fannin. Brent is the founder of FIA Homes in Austin, Texas. We talked to Brent about how he came to be in the construction industry and how FIA Homes started. We discuss a couple of the projects currently underway, and we talk about the deficit in skilled labor and some potential solutions. We hope you like this episode. If you do, share with a friend and give us a 5-star rating. Thanks for listening. Welcome to this episode of In the House. Today we are speaking with Brent Fannin. Brent is the founder of FIA Homes here in Austin, Texas. Brent, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, man.
I just want to dive right in. Tell me, I want to know your story. I want to know your background. Did you grow up here in Texas, or are you an Austinite originally?
Sure.
Tell us your story.
Texas native. I've been in Austin since 2001. So my wife and I moved here right after we got married. She's from the Pacific Northwest, and we were living in North Texas, where I'm from originally, Frisco, which when I grew up there was a spot on the map, and now it's this major metropolis, you know. But being from the Pacific Northwest, she just wasn't made for North Texas, and so Austin felt like a good fit because I wanted to stay here, and we moved down here and moved into the Zilker neighborhood, and that was kind of the beginning of my real estate career in Austin, Texas. So,
that's where you stayed ever since?
Yeah, pretty much. The majority of our projects are in that neighborhood, and when I moved to that neighborhood, I could just kind of sense the intrinsic value of that area. You know, you had the park, you had downtown, multiple ways to get downtown, freeways, and it's like, man, this is a really cool zone. And I don't know how long you've been in Austin, but back then it wasn't a cool zone. There was definitely some questionable stuff happening on Lamar. And my dad, he looked at me square in the eye. He said, "Son, are you sure you want to buy this house?" I said, "Yeah, I do. Yeah, I want to buy it." And then a few years later, you know, it definitely paid off, and you know, it kind of got started on the investment side of the business. So,
I guess on your website, it says that you're like third generation construction, right?
Yep.
Can you go into that?
Yeah, sure. So my granddad was like a true craftsman of craftsmen. He built his own house. When I say he built his own house, like he did it piece by piece.
Yeah.
After the war, he came back and built a house in West Texas in Slayton. And he ended up moving to Dallas, building another house there. But when I was growing up, being around him, he had a workshop in the back, and he was always tinkering, building furniture, toys, remodeling. And so I was exposed to that at a very young age. My dad, his profession is the nursery business. So we have one of the largest tree nurseries in Texas.
Oh, okay.
And so that's kind of how we ended up in Frisco. Our ranch is about 45 minutes north of there in Gunner.
Okay.
But same with my dad growing up. He built 2 of the family homes. And so I was heavily involved in that. And not involved in that, but exposed to that, I guess would be a better way to put it, at a young age. And then as I got older, I was always working with him. He was always buying remodel properties and, you know, flipping those things. And so I just started working next to guys, working in the trades, kind of being experienced to that. So that was my exposure to real estate.
What did you do? Like framing, a little bit of everything?
Yeah.
Or?
Well, you know, when you're a kid, you start out sweeping floors. Right. And I swept a lot of floors.
Yeah.
You know, but, you know, it's interesting. Like, even today, I'll go to my project and I'll pick up a broom sometime and just sweep, because, you know, when you're there in the house and it's quiet and you're just kind of like in that moment, right? Mm-hmm. And you experience things, or you see things inside the house. So, you know, as menial as that sounds, I think there's a lot that you can learn from that.
No, man, like jobs like cleanliness is like hugely important. I mean, it's probably one of the things, right, Adrian? It kind of goes when it gets out of hand, you notice it. Yeah. But when a job site's clean and organized, it's probably one of those things like you don't really pay attention to, and that's actually the point. Like, you don't want to walk on site and see all the trash. You want to see the house. You want to see the details and the craftsmanship and all the hard work that's gone into, you know, making it what it is. Yeah. And so
Well, it does, and it sets a precedent for, I think, the workmanship that you get for the trades coming in. Yeah. You know, if a guy shows up and your job is tight, you know, their expectation of the work that they're going to do on that side, I think, is higher. Yep. You know, if they show up and it's a mess, you know, maybe they feel like they don't have to put the work in, you know. So I agree 100%. I mean, cleanliness is a huge part of what we do on a weekly basis. And I frankly can't think about my project the right way unless it's not clean. So, yeah. But yeah, I mean, obviously starting to clean. And then, you know, I worked on a framing crew. I did plumbing. I messed around with electrical, roofing. I mean, you name it. You know, I had my fingers on it starting 14, 15 years old all the way until I moved out to California for college when I turned 18. But it's kind of like the base point of that experience. And I think through that, you know, watching my granddad craft things and create things, and then, you know, being around my dad building houses, it was just an exciting experience to see something come from nothing. You know, you start with this idea, this concept, and then that concept, you know, takes shape in a plan, and then that plan is kind of reviewed and revised. That plan becomes a structure, you know, through multiple stages. It's a cool process to see something come from nothing, you know, and I think that's a very unique thing about what we do for a living, right? Mm-hmm. Is, you know, what we touch is very tangible. A lot of people, you know, and not to knock anybody in the tech sector or anything like that, but, you know, a lot of things that are created nowadays, you know, are digital. They're intangible. You know, they're you can't go to that thing and say, you know, here it is. I'm going to put my hand on this rock wall. Well, know?
So that you said you're in real estate. So you've heard about like digital real estate, or like
sure.
What's up with that? Like that seems like. Have you heard of that?
No. Yeah, so it goes back to all this NTF and, you know, all this digital media that you can trade, but there's ways to buy plots of land and on digital platforms.
That's the most wild thing to me. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's very crazy. I don't know either.
So I have a friend in programming, and he says all he does is make digital donuts all day long.
So you, all right. So you kind of get a taste for the construction industry, throughout your childhood, and then, where do you go from there?
Yeah. So I go to California and I get a house close to the beach, and I start surfing instead of going to school. And of course, yeah. And I'm on the 7-year path to finish college because of that, you know. And my wife, we're married now at the time, and she says, "Look, you got to finish this deal. The fastest way for you to do it is to get an English degree." So I go off and I finish at Texas State with an English degree, and what in the world are you going to do with that now, you know? Yeah. So through happenstance, I got my real estate license. I go to work for a guy, Scott Turner, with Riverside Homes here in Austin. Okay. Yeah. And he's got a development company and a real estate brokerage, and so I'm, working at the brokerage, exposed to kind of what he's doing on the construction side. And at the same time, I have this background, and I'm always looking at real estate. My dad's, always been interested in real estate. And so we start buying small flips and turning those over. And, a couple of years goes by, and, buy my first lot. We do a couple new construction projects. And then it was kind of off to the races from there.
Is that when FIA Homes formed? Or when did that come about?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's been in... we've been a company since 2010 or 2012. So, again, kind of buying our first, real lot over in Zilker. And we did a house with Steve Zagorski. He was the first architect that we worked with at the time. My dad and I sketched out the floor plan on a napkin, and we had an idea about kind of what we thought the massing should be, and we worked very closely with him to come up with, a house that even today people drive by and say, "Man, it's an amazing looking house," and it's going on 12, 13 years old now. Yeah. So through this process, it's been a bit of a different path, I think, from an investment side of things. We've always been very driven by architecture and design first and foremost. We want to build interesting houses that can stand the test of time architecturally. I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday. We don't want to have something that you can point to and say that house was built in 2015 because it was following some specific trend.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part of that is we want to build a really high quality house. Just because it's a spec house, it doesn't mean that it has to be bottom line driven. And when I say that, I mean a lot of the things that we bring to a custom house in terms of building practices, building sciences, finishing details and things like that are what you would typically find in a custom home, because we found that there are clients out there who want to go through or would want to go through the custom home building process, but they don't have the bandwidth, the time it takes to go through design.
It's stressful.
Yeah, it is.
It requires a lot out of it.
If we can make 90% of those decisions for someone, right?
Yeah.
And we found that there's a buyer for that. So, the business was fully geared towards spec houses for several years. We were always getting asked to do customs, through that whole process, but it was a small team at the time. I mean, it was myself really for several years wearing all the hats.
Yeah.
And I just didn't have the bandwidth. We were building a couple houses a year, and that was really all that I wanted to take on. I didn't want to, string ourselves out too much and make it too stressful. So,
are you still doing that volume, about 2 per year?
No. Now we've got a much larger team, and we've moved to about 6 of these projects.
What's your team look like?
So it's myself. We have 2 project managers. I have a guy in the office doing all of our bidding and estimating, and then we have a back end team doing all of our bill keeping and things like that. So it's a pretty good sized team. So when you say earlier about sitting in front of a computer, it makes me laugh because it seems like nowadays that's more of my job title is staring at plans and spreadsheets and kind of understanding the nuts and bolts part of the business. But it's an important part to me. What I think I told you the other day is we realized, hey, I'm pretty good at building these houses. How do we level ourselves up? And that was really coming through understanding our numbers. So we've spent a lot of time, figuring out how we can accurately estimate a house that has 60, 80 pages of detail on it, and it's very, very difficult. But through that process, we also build the house on paper, and so we're building it in our minds. We're, imagining all these details. And so that bidding and estimating process has also become a really integral part in how we prepare for the construction on these houses. One thing
with inflation, costs kind of running out of control. How are y'all bidding things for clients, but leaving enough there leeway so that, we can handle whatever the cost of something is?
Well, nowadays it's much easier now that things are leveled out. There was about 18 to 20 months where it was almost impossible. Fortunately, we had some understanding clients who were willing to ride that wave with us. We were also making some crazy assumptions about what the market was going to do based on, historical trends of what we were seeing in lumber and framing material and windows and steel and all this stuff that was on a roller coaster, right? It was stressful. I think, I'm glad that time is over, I think is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Because now, that everything is stabilized, our system is really clicking off. So, we know what our price per foot is on lumber. We know what it is on steel fabrication, so forth and so on. So we can apply those matrices to these houses fairly efficiently. And so that's been an exciting thing. But yes, it has put me in front of the computer more than in the field.
Yeah.
And it's hard. I'm like you guys. I love, seeing the product, man, being out there, figuring out the detail, analyzing, what it's going to take to execute this piece. And so I still get to do that, but not as much as I like.
Yeah.
Very, very common story for those that get into it.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, so you're kind of navigating through COVID and just the wild time that was. But I mean, did you have a whole lot of specs during that time? Or you like 50-50?
Yeah, at the time we were running mostly specs.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was my money at
Yeah,
play.
scary.
You know, the upside of that was the market was very aggressive at the time,
Yeah.
so the money that you were putting in, was easier to get back out. So and the business model has really never been to build these houses and figure out how to save money. It's more like, how do we manage money?
Yeah.
Across these scopes of work. How do we execute as many of these battles as we possibly can and keep this in a relative budget? During COVID, that was obviously much, much harder. Yeah. But, the houses were able to grab a premium and it worked out fine. So.
Oh, good. Yeah. That's awesome to hear. I toured yesterday. You kindly invited me to walk, one of your houses, and we actually have it up on the screen right now. So I'll take these pictures and I'll post them on Instagram so people listening can follow along and look at what we're looking at. But so this is one of the projects you got. Can you talk to us a little bit about what's going on here? And
yeah, sure. So this is a project that we're doing in Barton Hills. I bought the lot several years ago. The big driver for this was this amazing view that the house has on the back. It has a 180-degree view of downtown.
Yeah.
But I wanted to do a house that was somewhat low profile and from the street. Well, it's a term we learned in Palm Springs, is discreet from the street. So it's this idea that from the street, the house is very subdued and simple, but when you get around to the back, it has an amazing experience.
Yeah.
So, that was kind of the idea behind it when we took this to Mark Odom, and he helped us come up with, this really interesting design. It's a massive house for the neighborhood. It's 5,500 square feet.
Okay.
So, for Barton Hills, it's on the larger side. But yeah, to make this thing low profile and to have that feeling, we sunk it into the lot.
Mm-hmm.
So we have subgrade foundation. At the time I had not done one. So the process of pouring multiple pours to pull this off was a bit of a surprise to me, something we underestimated, but the effect is really, really spectacular. So.
Yeah, I agree. I like that, how it's kind of sunken into the hillside a little bit, and yeah, you can't see in the photo, but like the neighbor to the left of you is a 2-story, and it kind of just towers over, but yeah, I like what y'all did and kind of spread it out and made it low profile. But from the back, before we go to the back, let's kind of talk about some of these details on the front. So this, you were telling me yesterday, this is a thermally modified ash.
Yep.
Can you go, what is that?
So, there's a ton of thermally modified products out there right now. So they're taking typical softwood products, and they go through a process that basically pulls all the moisture and dries them out and creates a hardwood product out of a softwood. So the good thing about that is, there's a lot of concern about deforestation and exotics. And so you take a product like this, and it's more sustainable than doing a whole house out of Ipe, for example. It's also more cost effective, from a board foot perspective. But one of the drivers for this house specifically was, as we went through engineering, because this is on a hill, and because it had some challenging soils, which is typically what you find, the foundation on this was very robust from a structural perspective.
Uh-huh.
But when the architect proposed masonry on the upper level, all of a sudden the foundation, took a $750,000 turn.
Oh, wow.
You're like, okay, well, that's not sustainable. How are we going to, execute the exterior of this house? And I was not going to build an all stucco box. That's just not in our wheelhouse, architecturally. So wood was proposed, and I was concerned that, I think you guys know as well as I do, wood is not a great product for exterior siding in Central Texas.
Takes a lot of beating.
It does, and it becomes a maintenance situation for your client, right?
Mm-hmm.
So on this house, because it's 4-side exposure wood, the house was going to always be some different color, mm-hmm. and that concerned me. I just felt like architecturally, if the house was spotty, we would just lose some of that interest. So we do quite a bit of work with U.S. lumber brokers. Jenna over there, she brought me this product, said, hey, you guys might want to take a look at this. And what's interesting about it is not only is it a thermally modified product, which is, interesting, but becoming more standard, it has a pre-weathering agent on it that makes it gray out. Mm-hmm. So the color that you get on this house will be the long-term color that you'll end up with. So the client doesn't have to go in and do any staining, mm-hmm. Any additional maintenance. Once installed, it's a 40-plus year product. So, which makes it really cool.
That's impressive.
That was kind of my next question, was what the lifespan on that was. But that's really cool.
So a couple interesting things with that. I mean, we did it on a rain screen application. It comes in randoms, which was a challenge for some of our long runs. Mm-hmm. And so our millwork guy actually fabricated full-length pieces by pocket screwing the back. And we could do that because the thermally modified product is very stable. So it won't cup or twist at those joints. Mm. And so by doing that, we were able to install full-length pieces, which let us install this very flat on the wall. So if you go to this project and you look down the wall, it's,
I saw, I was definitely checking that. I was looking down some of these long walls and I was surprised. Yeah, they're very flat, very straight. And that's good.
But that's also on the guy doing the installation, right? I mean, you have to have somebody that's going to be thoughtful enough and take the time to really make that work. So
yeah, and I definitely want to get into that here in a little bit. But so you got your... Maybe we can go to another picture, but then you have these really pronounced, like deep steel shadow boxes. If you're looking at this, there it is, like the front elevation. I don't know. I'm a sucker for this detail. To me, this is just really cool. I would do this on my house if I could. But I like these steel shadow boxes. And it's interesting. We were talking about like flashing details and just, it looks so simple. Right, when you just walk up to it on first glance, it looks so easy. But when you realize, the windows kind of sunken into the wall, and it's like, how do you flash that? And then then you set your window, and then you got this 2,000 pound or more, probably 4,000 pound shadow box that you got to get into place and install. Like, it just looks effortless, but the amount of forethought that goes into that detail is pretty impressive.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's one of those details that, on paper wasn't really defined, but you start looking at it and you start, in my mind, a lot of the things that I really pay attention to are things that could be potential problems down the road, right? You look at this detail, the mass of these steel boxes, the wood siding, and you start thinking, man, if there was ever a leak in this location, we would have a massive challenge. What are we going to do to avoid that condition? So one of the cool things about this that you cannot see is that the windows themselves have this massive pan, and the pan is not flat. It actually is framed on an angle. Mm-hmm. So underneath the window is this angle, and we built the pan from the back side of the window all the way down the angle, turning down the exterior sheathing, and then waterproofing obviously inside those corners, and then all the way around the window using liquid flash. But the idea is if anything gets past that point, it will have a space to roll down and then hit the rain screen of the wood and then run out from underneath. Yeah. So it was one of those things that, when we started looking at it, I was like, man, we have to really go above and beyond. But, those are the kind of the things that get me excited about construction. There's no detail out there for that. I mean, we've all done something similar, maybe on a different project, but it's still a unique piece, So,
for sure.
But having a good fabricator on our team, the guy that does our roofing is also a master brake metal guy, and he helped us fabricate these huge full-piece pans. And, he understands the importance of the waterproofing detail. And, you get a team of minds together, that are willing to kind of hash it out. Yeah. It's pretty cool what you can come up with. So
yeah, for sure.
So your building science is correct. The logic is sound. A lot of people build and think, I'm going to prevent water from getting in here. That's the goal. I'm going to stop it. That's wrong. The water's going to get in there. Doesn't matter how. Who knows? It's going to get in there. The plan is exactly what y'all did, which is how does it get out?
Yep.
How do you manage a pathway to get out and manage it? And going back to what you said, Lonnie, it looks simple, it looks simple because it was done right.
Yeah.
And I have found that the more architecture you tend to look at, things look correct, they look simple, they look really good. Effortlessly, yes, that's a good word for it, because they were done right, they were done well. And then it almost takes some of the difficulty away, and you're like, no, you don't understand how difficult that was. It looks really good, but it was a lot harder to do than you think.
It's kind of funny, like the details that seem to go unnoticed are the ones that you lose sleep over.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. They are the ones that you lose sleep over, but those are the ones, and as you guys know, that are the most important to the project. You know.
Well, hats off to your steel contractor. He really did a great job on those boxes there. I mean, even just in that photo, I mean, they're all in a line. They're all.
Well, that's just it, right? You can make one box, that's easy, but there's 4 boxes that all line up with a perfect edge,
and that's super deep. Like, you know, that's a 24-inch deep.
Yeah, so it's
box.
And it's a double wall frame on the inside. So it's 2 2x6s with a gap in between them, like a big air gap in between them.
Is that for structure, or is that for...
It was to get these boxes to sit back inside of the framing, so they wouldn't protrude, beyond. So they would, you know, they're coming out, but they're not, you know, exploding out of the house. Right? They're inset. So
who are the windows?
So these were Western. You know, in hindsight, looking back on it now, we probably could have pulled off something similar by doing a site mold system. You know, the integration of the prefabricated window and the boxes was a bit of a challenge. Because you can't see it on this angle, but like looking at how you would get to the inside of the windows if you ever had to remove a piece of glazing, for example. Like, I mean, all these things had to be thought out, right? Like, you don't want to have the steel like make it where you can't ever replace a piece of glass. So in hindsight, I think, you know, and this is, I think, a good example of like a lot of things that we learn through construction, right? Like, we do things, we experience them, we go through them, and then we think about them. And you're like, wow, maybe I could have done this a little bit different. Like, we could have made it a little bit easier on ourselves. So
it's amazing that you are thinking about reglazing the windows, because one of the things that I find interesting that I've learned over the last several years is all the glass is basically the same, right? All the IG units, they're all basically the same, give or take some of the band that goes around the what is that called? The
sash?
No, the piece that holds the 2 pieces of glass apart.
Oh, I get I get what you're saying. Yeah, I don't know.
But what I find interesting is nobody's going around. None of the people selling the windows, no builders are going around going, oh, by the way, about 15 years from now, probably going to need to maybe replace most of the glass in all these windows.
Yeah, and that's part of the challenge too, is the maintenance and you know, just the accessibility.
Sure.
You know, that's I think that is often missed in the design is, you know, it's not just a one and done, install it and, you know, brush your hands and walk away. You know, you got to maintain that, and so you got to be thoughtful. And, you know, the end user, how are they going to maintain this? How are they going to, you know, if something were to go wrong, how do they get up there and replace a piece of glass? Like what you said. I mean, so taking that into consideration is, you know, that's what I like is, you know, those are the details that nobody thinks of.
Those are the details that you wish the guy thought of if you get involved in a remodel.
Yeah.
What happened here?
Yeah, what's that saying? Well, I don't know if it's a saying, but, you know, doing remodels makes you a better builder because you get to see how not to do something.
Sure.
So, okay, now we're looking at the back, and you're right. It's from the back as the lot slopes down. I don't know what the drop is in grade there, like 16 feet, but the house really...
Almost wouldn't know it's the same house.
Yeah, really, from the back, it really explodes. You know, you're looking at a double layer, you know, double stacked house. And so what we're looking at, you were saying yesterday, the areas that have the zip exposed will be a white stucco finish, like a smooth stucco.
Like a smooth stucco, yep.
Okay, so, but all the ash, the thermally modified ash is in. You know, you got your soffits, your ceilings are done, your pool's in, which, you know, that's good. That's a big milestone.
Integral stucco or?
Yes.
Nice.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know if you saw a sample of it yesterday, but it's our.
Well, I saw him working on the soffit, you know, and what I like too is that a lot of the exterior finishes are carried through into the interior. Yeah. I freaking love that detail. I love seeing like stucco. So the same stucco that they're working on here, that carries through into the interior ceiling, right? Like in the foyer, the entry into the master. Like, so you get this cohesive, this balance of materials from inside and out. And I always think that's nice. But so if you zoom back out, sorry, Adrian, tell me. So we got some pretty big cantilevers going on, right?
Yeah, huge cantilevers. The structural steel package on this house was very robust. But we wanted to have elements of this house feel like they were floating out in space.
Yeah.
In order to do that. Yeah. What's funny is, I look at this and you look in the corner of this detail, if you could pan over just a little bit to the right. There's one round.
Does it go over far enough?
No, it doesn't.
There might be another picture that can go over.
There's one round steel post, and the work that we did just to get that one post in that corner was astronomical from a fabrication perspective, But I mean, it was unavoidable. We just physically did not have the backspan necessary to carry both of those corners. And also structurally, that one column runs all the way down through the porch, down through the casita to a hard point in the foundation. So it's doing a lot of heavy lifting for the weight of that corner on the structure.
But it's hidden well. I mean, because there's a staircase kind of back behind that it integrates into that staircase, so it almost just seems like it's not even there.
Who did your engineering?
PCW did the engineering.
I like them. I like them a lot.
So,
I know them.
Rolando.
I like Rolando. He's a good dude. I like him a lot.
So, his dad started the foundation concrete side of the business, and then Rolando went and he has an engineering degree. He worked as an engineer for several years before he came back to the concrete side. And so he did the foundation and he did the engineering on this house. So it's kind of an interesting marriage of engineer and contractor underneath one roof.
So those guys are great. They have a passion.
Yeah.
And they are really enjoyable to work with because of that passion. And because, like you said, Rolando, he's there.
Yeah.
He's not a paper pusher. He's out there. He understands it. He gets into it. Yeah, they're good guys.
Yeah, I mean, they're into concrete, and for me, those are the guys that I like to work with. I like to work with the guys that are into their trade.
Yeah,
100%.
What they do.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, whether you're doing concrete or stucco or whatever it is, right? Like if you have that guy on your team, I mean, it's just a huge asset.
It's such a confidence builder. I mean, I'm looking at this picture. I mean, there's cantilevers everywhere. I mean, you got these two cantilevers here. You got that roof that they're doing the stucco soffit on right now. That whole thing's cantilevered. That whole master wing is cantilevered. The master bath over there is all cantilevered. Like that's pretty impressive. Like they're.
I know nobody listening can kind of see these pictures, but what is that box? Is that a future window?
Yeah, so that is
tell me about that.
Yeah, so that box is actually the primary bathroom, and so that window is in the shower, and the lower portion of that window is going to be touch glass. So you can adjust it from 0 to fully opaque, and then the top will be matching low yarn, so the glazing will match. But the reason that it's like that is the view from that window is amazing.
Yeah, and I'm such an idiot. I should have turned around and taken a picture of the view, because you do get a really wonderful view of downtown Austin from here.
So in that piece, it was kind of that situation where how do you give the client the potential privacy that they may want?
That they may want.
Yeah.
Because you may just want to stand there naked looking at downtown.
Yeah.
I mean, that's totally what I would do.
Yeah. I would too, but the second that you don't put it in, that end user is like,
But whose thought was that?
It was mine.
Right, exactly. I mean, you're going into these details, you're thinking ahead, saying like, what is the end user going to want in this. And so putting that in, like, this is a spec home. Like, you didn't have to do that, but you went through all of the headaches and everything that was necessary to get that detail in there, because, and I think that's going to be an awesome detail.
Well, it's interesting because you don't have to do any of this. You know what I mean? Like, you have to want to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference in, our business model, is that we want to go in and execute these things at a very high level. Does it have a payoff in the end? Sure it does. It makes a more interesting product, something that people will grab onto. But at the same time, it's exciting to want to make a house feel like it flows out in space. To want to do a window that gives that kind of privacy or lack thereof, depending on the direction you want to go. So.
Yeah. Now, you said this is a spec. Is it sold?
No, it is not. No.
You said you had some interest though.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, good.
Yeah. We've been very fortunate. The majority of our houses have sold off MLS through word of mouth. So we've created a brand that is kind of flies underneath the radar. We don't do a lot of advertising. We don't expose these houses, in that way, and we usually pick up a buyer, kind of along this path. So.
Awesome. So this is a spec home, but so the next one that we're going to look at, this is one. So this house is by Coexist Studios here in Austin. I'm a fan of theirs, and that's actually how I stumbled upon you, as because you're the builder. But this one's just right down the road. Tell me about this facade that we're looking at.
Sure.
This is. We kind of discussed this yesterday. I'm not a huge fan of limestone, but this is kind of selling me. I like this dry stack flagstone pattern. Like, this takes a lot of skill and patience to be able to achieve something like this. Like, you have a really skilled mason here. Like, that's pretty impressive. So,
what's the term for that?
So it's a dry stack.
Just dry stack?
Yeah.
Dry stack flagstone. There's not a more technical, nerdy term for it?
No, I mean, it's, when you take the mortar joints out, it becomes a dry stack. And so we're doing this one as a custom with Coexist. We've done several projects with them, both spec and custom in the past. The client for this house spent a lot of time in Greece, down in Mexico. They just really liked this dry stack concept that you see in these other countries. And so they provided an inspiration image from something that they had seen in the past to the architect, and the architect provided to us that you think you can pull this off. And I showed it to my mason. He said, yeah, absolutely. It's a very old style of laying stone.
Yeah.
I think it's a style that takes experience.
That takes talent, for sure.
Yeah. But, I don't think every mason, can go do this job. You have to know how to piece these things in together. And it is a giant, puzzle piece, over 7,000 square feet of lay, because it's a huge installation.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's dry stack, but that is tight. That is probably the tightest dry stack I've seen.
It's phenomenal. I mean, and I know why you brought me to this one, because...
Well, I brought you because I heard you say that you didn't like...
and I appreciate that.
Texas limestone. I said, well, let's go take a look at something I've got
sold down. This is awesome. So, and this definitely speaks more to the mid-century modern style. Is there another picture? I don't know if you zoom out. Just very, like, not a whole lot of 90 degrees angles, like very sharp angles. I mean, this seems right up your alley, right?
Yeah, it is. I think I've always been drawn to mid-century. I think the aesthetic is very pleasing to the eye. It's timeless. You can look at a house that was built in that era and still see interesting aspects of it today that are very fresh and interesting. So, when I did my first project with Coexist, I went to them and I said, I want to do a different roof line. So we did this project on Arpdale that had all these undulating angles, and it was just a really cool detail. And So yeah, working with them to kind of push that idea was really cool. But yeah, on this, with these big overhangs and, angles coming to a point, it definitely reads in that way. Mm-hmm. But it's also fresh too, taking these huge smooth stucco fascia and soffit and then marrying them with this very rough stone is a really interesting play on materiality. And create some interesting moments for the house.
So how do you balance, and I see you've done it here, how do you balance, because this is like a proverbial argument in stucco, the expansion joints with the architectural intention? Because, of course, structurally, every 144 square feet, it should all be wrapped in an expansion joint.
So with this, we knew the parameters necessary for function. And then we went to the architect with a layout, proposing what we thought we needed to do. And then based on that collaboration with the installer, ourselves, and the architect, we came up with a layout for the expansion joints. But you're right, it is always a challenge, believe it or not, this architect didn't have any expansion joints on their detail.
That's pretty common.
I do believe that, actually.
They were going for this super smooth, flat surface. And, as you guys know, sometimes, function has to arm wrestle with form, and come up with a solution that will make this house function because, this is a beautiful detail, but like I was showing Lonnie on site, it had to have some thoughtfulness in how we created a weep on the bottom of this thing to make sure water didn't run down the soffit, for example.
Yeah, and I should have taken some more detailed photos. I did like how y'all achieved that detail because, you have a stucco soffit and then you have a stucco fascia, and, the trick is, obviously water is going to absorb into that stucco and run down your water and air barrier, and you don't want it to get trapped or pushed back horizontally into your fascia or your soffit, and just sit there. I mean, that's going to rot. It's going to cause rot and ruin your stucco over time. So, achieving that is very hard to do, and I really liked how y'all did that here.
Well, there was a stucco riglet, an off-the-shelf riglet that was provided in the drawings.
Yeah.
And I showed that to my stucco guy, and he just right away shot it down. He's like, absolutely not. I've seen this thing fail. Yeah. We've made repairs because of this riglet, because it doesn't have anything on the backside of it to keep water from weeping down the soffit. And so, again, kind of like the last house that we looked at through a meeting of the minds, ourselves, the stucco guy, our roofer on the fabrication, we came up with a piece that has a very simple, you can't see it in this image, but kick on the back, turned over, that keeps water from running down the inside of that soffit. So, it's back to your point about the functionality and like the long-term, livability of these houses is like in maintenance, it's like thinking about these things because that water is going to do, like you said, is going to do what it's going to do. So
it's going to find a way no matter what. Yeah. And, somebody who really doesn't care probably would have just stuccoed that corner and made that connection there, but you took the time to figure out how you're going to manage the water and the condensation behind that stucco and how you're going to deal with that. So,
and it's interesting, like, we're doing this detail and we're right on a hard corner. So the soffit, fascia and siding, we've had a lot of compliments and just interest in it. And I had a builder pull up, start looking at this riglet detail. He's like, oh my gosh, we're involved in a remodel right now where we're literally ripping out stucco soffit because it was done in the way that was proposed. And, this is such a cool way to do it. And, it's exciting to share that method and condition with a guy who's interested in wanting to do it right.
Yeah, for sure.
We said.
You just pointed out very subtly, but the incredible importance of the collaboration between the builder, the architect, and the trade.
Yeah.
And while it's important that the builder holds their ground and tells the trade how they want the product done for the quality and the purpose of what we're doing. At the same time, it's amazing to go to the trade who you trust and value enough to say, okay, here's what we're supposed to do. What do you think about it? What's best practice? How is this flawed? And then to work together to get his input to make it better, but hold true to the quality of the product and make it better.
Yeah.
So that collaboration, that makes products so much better.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because you want to listen to the trade. I mean, they're the one with the real experience.
To the right trade.
Yeah, they're. Say what?
To the right trade.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
Knowing the trade that's giving you a bunch of BS.
Yes.
Oh, no, this molding won't work. Nobody does this. No, that's BS.
Yeah, you're full of shit.
You just don't want to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but you guys can sniff out the difference between those guys pretty quick.
That's true. Yeah, that comes with some experience.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's continue on. I don't know if we have another. Dude, so this blew me away. I love seeing this detailed. So this is the
holy crap.
This is the master bath.
Feel for that tile guy.
I don't know this. What's that wall? Is that 15 feet?
15? It is probably 12 feet to the top of the light cove.
Wide.
Width-wise? 15, it's
20?
at least 15, maybe 18.
So huge wall, and then there's this natural light coming in, pouring down this wall from a skylight above into the master with this herringbone tile, and I love that. To me, that's phenomenal. So hats off to your tile guy for being able to pull that off, because I mean, you got some crazy handmade tile with a herringbone pattern. So good luck keeping that, flat and straight. But
well, the good thing about that is that it is a handmade product. So, it not being totally flat and
it's forgiving.
Yeah, it's absolutely forgiving. But it's still, as you can tell, very, very difficult lay. I mean, those are all individual herringbone place pieces. And I mean, that was almost 3 weeks of installation just on that wall,
Yep.
But, when you have a tile guy that really represents his work as art, and, that wall is a work of art. When you come into that house, it's like going into a museum and experiencing, a piece of art. So
no, it's beautiful, and I love how that natural light kind of just shines down that wall and really highlights it. I mean, it looks,
what's
great.
cool is from the exterior of this house, that primary bathroom is just a solid wall of masonry.
Okay.
And so I had a neighbor say, "There's no windows in that bathroom." I'm like, "Come inside, let me show you what's going on in here." And then you walk in, and there's just this massive, expansive skylight that brings that natural light into the space, and in a very interesting way too.
It looks great. Do we have another?
Yeah, Lonnie, you're gonna have to create like a slideshow that people can go along with as they listen to the podcast.
Oh yeah, no. Like I said, I'm gonna post like all of these pictures to Instagram, so you should follow along. If you don't already, you should follow us. But all of these are going to be uploaded so that we can you can see what we're talking about. But here's another shot looking up into that light cove, and just really good. Yeah, your hats off to your tile guy, because he did a phenomenal job there.
What's interesting about that cove is we did it with standard size skylights.
Yeah, but you brought the ceiling in to narrow that.
That's exactly
that gap.
right.
Yeah.
So when you look up there, you just didn't see this giant skylight.
Yeah.
So Coexist has done a really good job at creating these interesting moments with skylights using standard sizing that don't feel like just a hole inside of the ceiling.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very cool detail. And then obviously your shower glass isn't in yet, but there's a shower is there a kind of a freestanding tub?
The freestanding tub sits in front of this tile detail that we're talking about. The other side is just one giant shower.
Cool. So then, I don't know if you keep going in the photos here. There's just more shots of the soffit. So this is a hemlock, right?
Yep.
And you can see there. See, this is another thing that caught my eye, was the attention to the lighting in your soffit, making sure that your lighting falls, perfectly center of your plank. in your soffit, and then you have equally spaced planks.
Duh.
Yeah. There's no skinny, rips, right next to your wall. Like, it was very meticulous and thought out and planned. So that kind of caught my eye. And then, but those are the kind of details that, again, the end user's probably never going to notice that. But
yeah, I like to say this, and I think it's all these details, right? Like that you and I notice, builders notice. The homeowner may not notice, but it's the culmination of all these details that give a feeling of quality to the house.
Yeah.
If all these things are dialed and, together cohesive, they may not be able to point to that, but they have a feeling of the house, the feeling of quality. So
I'm going to modify that a bit, Brent, because while I agree with what you're saying, they will notice, but they won't notice it right away. And what I have found, and Lonnie and I have talked about this, and I know for a fact clients have done this and have told me this, that client may not notice those lights are lined up perfectly and symmetrical in the middle of all the boards the first year, second year, maybe not even the third year. But there will be a day when he's standing around just looking at stuff and goes, wow, those all line up perfectly symmetrical down there. Over the time that they enjoy the product, they notice those things continually. And I tell people, it could cost a lot. We're probably going to bust the budget because things take longer than we would like them to. But if you stick with the quality, that's what, clients stand around, their friends come over and they go, holy cow, look how amazing that is. The client doesn't go, yeah, but do you know how long it took? No, he doesn't say that. He says, yeah, that looks badass, doesn't it? Let me tell you who did it.
Yeah.
And I hope you're right, because sometimes I feel like we're just doing this for our own enjoyment.
No, I tell people, I joke around. I'm like, when we build a house, I go into every bathroom and I sit on the toilet.
Yeah.
And I just sit there and I look around and I'm like, because the client is going to spend hours sitting on that toilet just staring at details.
You're right.
They will notice the details.
And I heard you say that before, and I do that now where, we're punching out. And I'll go and sit on the toilet.
Yeah.
And I'll look around and see what I see, because your perspective changes when you're, sitting on a toilet, and there's things that really do kind of stick out to you when you're at that elevation versus standing. It's kind of mind blowing. But yeah, I practice that now because you've said that. I've heard you say that.
I like it. I think I'm going to start.
You should. You should try it. It's a good tip. But we've talked about some of the skilled trades that it takes to pull off some of these details.
Sure.
And I hear it talked about a lot about this, deficit in skilled labor. Are you seeing that at all? Is that just something we tell ourselves, or is there any truth to that?
I mean, to be honest with you, I don't see it inside of our business model. I don't know if you guys are similar, but we use a lot of the same subs over and over. Mm-hmm. And so the group that we put around us, I think for the most part, has a skilled base. Obviously you have turnover inside of that. More so nowadays, I notice that there's more guys on the job. But, in terms of that skilled labor, no, I think it's there. I think it's, who you have on your team is how that kind of shows itself.
Adrian, I'm interested to hear your opinion as well on this downturn of quote unquote, skilled labor. And, is there actually any merit to that? Are we seeing it trend that way? Or are we seeing the younger generation kind of come up and fill these positions and learning these skills?
I think we have two things going on. I think that there is a glut in the market for people that use their hands, skilled craftsmen that have learned a skill or craft.
Yeah.
But I also think that the market is changing. Construction, I'm starting to hear it. It's tapering down a little bit. There's going to be more people available to work, but probably not at a higher caliber. Now, I think the third prong of that is what is setting up new people to come into the craftsman industry.
Yeah.
Right? There's great programs if you want to become an architect and a pathway to do that. And if you want to become a computer programmer, or if you want to become, whatever, a finance person.
Even a builder. I mean, even if you want to become like a project manager, like there's, degree programs out there for.
But if I love carpentry,
yeah.
and I love woodwork,
yeah.
How do I go and really become a good, skilled carpenter?
Yeah.
And that doesn't have any stigma that is less than the other industries out there. Because clearly, I think through the 90s and early 2000s, everything was tech-based, mm-hmm. right? You're going to make a ton of money if you go into tech, and if you're working with your hands, sorry.
Well, I think you hit on the point that it's the stigma,
mm-hmm.
right?
We talked about that, yeah.
Yeah, like how do you...
That's changing.
How do you remove the stigma from a guy who is going to be an expert brake metal fabricator, right? Mm-hmm. Like, how do you make that, for lack of a better term, sexy mm-hmm. as a profession? Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because as a society, we have identified... We're going to go beat up on computer programmers again, but like that's a sexy profession, right? Like going to an office, working for Google, or whatever.
That doesn't sound sexy at all.
Well,
sitting in a cubicle all day long.
But to you and I, it doesn't. But I mean, I think to the majority of the young people today, like they see that as their career path, right? And when you and all the guys sitting in this room today would say, we think the guy that can lay that masonry, right, is just as sexy as it is writing computer programming.
Yeah.
So how do you change that stigma inside of young people's mind? I don't really know. You hit an interesting point. We're talking about the availability of skilled labor, and that skilled labor and the age differential is probably something that we see, right? Like on your masonry crew, for example, how many of those guys are young guys? And how many of those guys are guys that have been doing masonry their whole life?
Yeah.
And so, I noticed that as I look around these trades and I look at the age gap here, and I'm thinking 10 years from now, 15 years from now, like, are we going to have enough guys inside of this skill set? And I don't know.
I know I've mentioned it before. The statistic right now, just for plumbing, for every 5 plumbers that retire, only 1 new master plumbing license is being pulled to replace that. So to your point, that trajectory is not good.
Yeah.
It's a pendulum. It'll swing. And there's also, we're in a very niche, high-end market. I think it's a lot easier to be proud of the things that we do rather than...
I think
if you're going to go build track homes and you're a millwork guy for track homes, you're just throwing it on the wall.
And okay, so what I was going to say was, and I think we have a culture nowadays that seems to gravitate towards very little input, but having a lot of reward, so doing as a minimal amount of work as possible and reaping a high reward for that. And working in construction, especially in the trades, is you get what you put into it. So your reward is probably equal to the amount of effort that you put into it.
It's just not immediate.
It's not immediate. No, it takes time, which is also another challenge. And I think that's maybe the problem is this younger generation that's coming in is wanting to do the least amount of work for the highest amount of gain.
I do think, though, on the flip side of that, because I have a kid who is about to turn 16, and in his generation, like when we went to college, at least when I went to college, like, you came out of college, like, I'm going to get this job. This is a guaranteed, like, ticket to success.
Yeah.
And I think this generation coming up doesn't necessarily see a college education as that same type of ticket that we saw,
Which is good for the trade industry.
Exactly. Yeah, you think the pendulum's starting to swing back the other way.
If you can do 2 things, right? Like if you can make this trade work feel valuable to that person, right? Financially valuable. And all of us guys sitting right here know that's true, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the guys that can do this work are getting paid.
Yeah, they are.
I mean, they are getting paid. And, if you can show the value of that to someone, and you have to have a group of people who still want to create with their hands, right? Like, I mean, that's like inside of all of us, right? It's been inside of us since mankind began. Like, we've been building and creating. So like this concept can't be like dead and void inside of your generation.
Thumbs.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, maybe there is an opportunity there,
And I think some of that too is, and I have a love-hate relationship with social media. I really do. But there is some merit to being able to showcase, your work and, put it out there for everybody to see. Because, I mean, that's where the younger generation is. Yeah. They're online. They're on social media. They're on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, or whatever. And the more impact you can have there, then that's going to influence them in hopefully in a positive way, and kind of push them in that direction of hopefully joining a trade. But yeah, I think maybe that outreach should come earlier in life. Maybe we're trying to outreach in like middle school, and try to.
I mean, I know that it's out there. Crockett High School is close to where we live, and they have a whole trade-specific portion of their curriculum. Yeah. Where they're teaching kids how to frame. I see them out there building sheds that you can buy, building picnic tables. And so it's there, I mean, I guess the question is, how do we propagate that?
I mean, because there's just something rewarding about being able to work with your hands, and then at the end of the day, you have a product that you're proud of. I mean,
that's kind of, I went back to, statement I made earlier, man, to see something come from nothing. Yeah. It's a very unique experience. I think as builders, we're sitting here maybe taking that for granted, right? Because we experience it on a daily basis. Yeah. Uh-huh. But I do think it's a unique thing that I would hope more people could, have an experience doing. So. Yeah. And all hope isn't lost. I mean, I have specific trades on our team right now where I've seen young guys come up over the last 2-3 years and really come into their own.
I agree. I mean, you do see it. The ones that get it, who go, this is such an opportunity. Yeah.
Well, how do builders? How do we help the younger generation? How do we help the trades, and how do we outreach?
I think you share the passion. Mm-hmm. Like, that's number one. You share the passion, and you give it accessibility to people, because it's interesting. When I go and I'll talk to somebody about something and nothing that's planned, but then let's start talking about this particular construction detail, and we get excited about it and we geek out about it. People pick up on that. Yeah. And so I think just sharing the passion is probably the first thing, because then people pick up on that and go, I want to be a part of that. Yeah. I'd like to get involved in that.
I agree with that.
I mean, I think also exposure. I mean, like, plain and simple, like, how do we expose people to this thing, that we live and breathe on a daily basis,
Yeah. No,
it comes back to stigma, though, and it's a social thing. So I think as a society, as we change our social perspective of it, it will help. Guys like Mike Rowe out there that are helping make it cool. That's going to be a big deal.
Yeah. Well, shout out to Mike Rowe, because I'd love to have Mike Rowe on the show, but hopefully one day. But Brent, gosh, this has been a great conversation, but I appreciate your time, and thank you for letting me tour your projects that you got going on. I'd love to be able to, in the future.
I'm disappointed I didn't go.
Open invitation.
Pick up on that.
Yeah, I do enjoy it, and I think it's one of those things that I would like to do more of. Sharing these experiences and these details with other people, and frankly, like, why I'm interested in this podcast. To be honest with you, like, when you hit me up, I'm like, who is this guy? What are they talking about? And so I was skeptical. I listened to like part of one. I'm like, I don't know, but then I started really listening, and I'm like, okay, these are all people that share like this same passion and interest, you know, and it's cool. It's cool to talk about it. It's cool to have other people experience. And frankly, maybe that's what we're all pointing to today, talking about this trade situation. Like, you know, we need to expose this for more people to experience. So.
I agree. And I appreciate you saying that because, that's definitely the goal. I mean, we've had people on here with really vastly different backgrounds and, you know, not all of everybody on here is in construction. You know, there's architecture and art and designers and other podcasters. Like, but the common thread that's shared amongst everybody is passion.
Yeah,
and I think that's what kind of drew me to your work and things that you're doing on the field. Is you can tell there's passion behind, you know, the jobs that you do, and so I commend you for that.
I appreciate you saying
impressive work.
Thank you.
But Brent, I appreciate your time.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate you guys.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
We'll do this again at some point, but appreciate you, Brent.
Yeah, thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this discussion. For more information on upcoming episodes, follow us on Instagram. We want to hear from you, so leave us some feedback to help us shape future episodes.